So my name's Jordon Berg Powers. I'm the executive director of Mass Alliance. Mass Alliance, so you have all talked, and let me tell you how important it is to care about the Senate and Congress. I get the real pleasure of caring a lot about Massachusetts. I wake up every day and think about how can we make the Massachusetts State House more progressive. And how can we make your towns and cities, all 351 of them, more progressive and more training ground for the place we move up? I think a lot when people say, like, what does Mass Alliance do? I think a lot about Catherine Clark. So once upon a time, my old boss sat in a room and encouraged her to run for school committee. And then she ran and lost for state senate, and then we were there for state rep, and then state senate, and then now she's one of the many awesome Congress people we send to Washington, D.C. So it really does start from that ground up. And one of the things I like most about working for Mass Alliance, and I think what's exciting about this here, is just we really think about how can we win. I care a lot about winning. I don't really like to just, although it's important, they all build on themselves. I don't like to just run to lose. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and let me tell you how frustrating it was to have to lose race after race and always have to vote for somebody who I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, right? Better to have great people who have the resources, have the education, have the things they need to get from the get-go. And that's a lot of what we'll do, and we're gonna teach you in our session some of the reasons why we do the things we do. But I guess I first want to take you back to the real dark day of 2016. I had a bad day before we started getting presidential returns. We had a bunch of seats across Massachusetts that we thought Democrats were gonna win on, and we didn't win a single one in Massachusetts. Not a single one flipped towards us in a presidential year. And then I called my friends in Pennsylvania, and they're like, Pat Toomey's gonna win. And I was like, oh my God, what? The most unpopular senator in the country is gonna be reelected. And I was like, oh my God, we're in trouble. So by the time, we got the orange crazy person, I was already sort of like despondent and sort of worried about it. And I remember my wife was crying, and she was like, really worried. And I remember just feeling like alone, honestly, like we were gonna be alone. And so so we decided to go to the Women's March. I don't know if you know before that, but every single person was like, you guys are crazy, something bad's gonna happen. I was like, no, I think we're gonna be fine. But we left our daughter behind, which we almost never do. And we went there, and I remember we couldn't get off the metro station in DC. And I was like, oh, this is weird. I'd lived in DC for a long time. I'd worked in the Democratic institutions, and I've been to a lot of protests. I mean, a lot of protests. And I'd never seen, and I was like, okay, this is a little weird. Maybe they're trying to do traffic. And we got off a side street, and I looked down the hill on the side street. It was a side street. And there was more people than I'd ever seen at a protest in DC, and I bawled. I mean, I cried. I was just like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And so I just want to thank you for being here, because that's really what I think about 2016. It's not the things that we've all had to face. It's the ways in which we've showed up to change what's otherwise likely to happen. And that's really what I'm going to ask you to do. So, how many of you have knocked on doors? Raise your hands. That is awesome. How many of you have made phone calls or postcards? I love postcards, great. How many of you have been told why you do those things? Right, not that many. Great, we're gonna explain it to you in our session, so you have a better sense of why these things work and why we do them. But I mostly just wanna leave with one final thing, and I'm gonna tell actually my story, which I almost never tell. I almost never talk about why I got into this work. I do come from a political family, but that's not why I do this. In fact, if I had my druthers, I would be at home with my daughter, just like cleaning and like watching General Hospital. Like, these are my real joys. I would never leave my house. I would be super happy just being there. And so I think, I think a lot about sort of where I grew up in my childhood. So when I was a kid, I had a friend who was a really good kid. He'd never gotten into trouble. We were really young. And we all got arrested for standing on a corner. And we all had pot put in our pockets. And my father was a lawyer, which I informed the police as I was like, congratulations, I'm gonna own your car and all the police department, because you should put it like my father's gonna sue you. And they're like, they let me go, but they let him go. And he went to jail. He went in a time where we believed in super predators and locking up people, and so he was a bad kid, whatever that meant. He'd never done anything wrong in his life, and he had to join a gang to survive. And so I remember like it was yesterday, going to the park with one of my friends who was in another gang, and watching him, my friend who had gotten out, stab my other friend in the back. And he was not the sort of person who would have done it 2 years earlier, but he needed to stay happy in the gang, and that's how he got in. And I think not about the violence of it. I think about the hopelessness of the act. I remember the just total hopelessness on both of their faces, like it was yesterday. It's burned into me. And I just think in America, like, what are we doing? The kids, I mean, these are kids, had that much lack of hope for the future. And so that's my fire for getting up and getting out and getting out of my house. I think about it a lot, and you don't need to have something have that moment like that. I hope nobody ever does, to have that fire, but I want you to take whatever it is that got you here today, whatever gets you to be involved, and to use that fire to stretch yourself, because that's really what we're talking about today, is to get in, to be uncomfortable, to be as uncomfortable as is safe for you, as still allows you to be also, where you are, but to be brave in this moment, to rise to this occasion. Because that's really what this moment demands. It demands for me to rise to this moment, and it demands for you to rise to this moment. And I thank you for taking the first step by being here, and all the door knocking that you've done, and all the phones that you've done, and all the things that you do, because they do make a big difference in the long run. So please, in this moment, think about the ways in which you can be just a little bit more brave, stretch yourself just a little bit more, because that's how I know we're gonna transform not just Massachusetts, but really transformation for the nation starts in America, starts in Massachusetts for the rest of America. So thank you all very much.